Good lovers and winged spirits, I come to you with the fifth sermon to the dead from Jung's The Red Book. When the following night came, the dead approached noisily, pushing and shoving. They were scoffing and exclaimed, "Teach us, fool, about the church and Holy Communion." But Philemon stepped before them and began to speak. And this is the fifth sermon to the dead. I think it's interesting that this is a sermon. I have my students in world religions write a sermon to any audience from any perspective on any topic. I should give this as an example. Is it the dead who are those that need a sermon? The purpose of a sermon to wake someone up, resurrect someone. Who are the dead? The world of the gods is made manifest in spirituality and in sexuality. The celestial ones appear in spirituality, the earthly in sexuality. Spirituality conceives and embraces, it is woman-like, and therefore we call it Mater Celestis, the celestial mother. And it says in a footnote that in the 1925 seminar, Jung said sexuality and spirituality are pairs of opposites that need each other. And then also the Mater Celestis is not Mary or the church, but Aphrodite. And again, this is from the 7 sermons, the 5th sermon. Sexuality engenders and creates. It is man-like, and therefore we call it Phallos, the earthly father. The sexuality of man is more earthly, that of woman is more spiritual. The spirituality of man is more heavenly, it moves toward the greater. The spirituality of woman is more earthly, it moves toward the smaller. So, in thinking about what sexuality is, symbolically, metaphorically, we can think of it as desire, curiosity, attraction, creativity, growth, instinct, passion, an urge toward union, the idea of moving toward. And the connection between sexuality and spirituality might be something like the flower and the bee, the plants and the sun, and even the roots toward and within the earth or dew dropping and the earth mother mouth receiving and drinking. I think we can look at spirituality here as a capacity to perceive meaning and hold awareness, thinking about the spirit as breath and mind, maybe reflection, discernment, symbolic understanding, and to see spirituality and sexuality as pairs of opposites that need each other. Sexuality seems like this generative kind of force where spirituality is more oriented. So In looking at this duality, and more about spirituality, it could be self-awareness, orientation toward truth, and the ability to witness experience. So, in thinking of this duality, we have sexuality, which might say go, or it's not even a saying, it's a doing. And spirituality will ask where and why. Sexuality being movement, spirituality being orientation. Sexuality pushing outward, spirituality pulling inward. Sexuality generating and spirituality interpreting. Sexuality expanding and spirituality reflecting. So often, in seeing these two as pairs of opposites that need each other, I think there's going to always be that tension. And the tension can either feel like a conflict, or if sexuality and spirituality, the masculine and the feminine, can learn each other and step together into a rhythm, a flow, a dance, then it will feel more harmonious. So, what might it mean here, the greater and the smaller? My friend was saying that we might be able to look at it in terms of a movement. And if you're listening, thank you for this. Like the part to the whole and the whole to the part. And I'm trying to think more about what that might mean. I did write a poem in terms of thinking about it. It might not be in the exact final version, but I really liked this idea, and even the rhythm of that made sense. So I interrupt my reading for a poem. The part to the whole to the part, holding a baby, quiet breath, concentrated attention, feather falling from mother to soft skin, love being seen, the pulse of beauty coursing through the body like a drug flowing in veins, making cold, then warm, sweet fever. Turning the view once outward, searching for God in vast sky, inward to a minute awareness of each moment's ecstasy. A spiritual practice becoming small, slow chipping away of the marble block to allow the true self's form to emerge, then disappear, exhale into soft light. So that's where I am with understanding it. Mendacious and devilish is the spirituality of man, and it moves toward the smaller. Mendacious and devilish is the spirituality of woman, and it moves toward the greater. Each shall go to its own place. So first I wonder, what is this intentional deceit? What is the lie that is told, and when is it told? I also think of the pre-Socratics here, thinking about different elements, fire, water, earth, air, and how the description of them includes their natural movements. The earth moving toward the center, fire moving up, like a soul atom. Man and woman become devils to each other if they do not separate their spiritual ways, for the essence of creation is differentiation. The sexuality of man goes toward the earthly, the sexuality of woman goes toward the spiritual. Man and woman become devils to each other if they do not distinguish their sexuality. Man shall know the smaller, woman the greater. I think we can interpret this metaphorically. I don't know if that was Jung's intention, if he thought there was also a literal element or layer to this, but I'm more inclined to see it as symbolic language, and I think that helps me reduce sort of any resistance I might have otherwise. Let me know what you think about that. Man shall differentiate himself both from spirituality and sexuality. He shall call spirituality mother and set her between heaven and earth. He shall call sexuality phallos and set him between himself and earth. For the mother and the phallos are superhuman daemons that reveal the world of the gods. And I want to go back to the beginning of the sermon that said the world of the gods is made manifest in spirituality and in sexuality. What is it about this pair of opposites that open us up to the divine, whether that's outside of us, inside of us, the created third thing when two come together? They affect us more than the gods, since they are closely akin to our essence. If you do not differentiate yourselves from sexuality and from spirituality, and do not regard them as an essence both above and beyond you, you are delivered over to them as qualities of the pleroma, which is coming from the Gnostics, that kind of primordial realm of source differentiating into paired complementary emanations. Spirituality and sexuality are not your qualities, not things you possess and encompass, rather they possess and encompass you, since they are powerful daimons, manifestations of the gods, and hence reach beyond you, existing in themselves. No man has a spirituality unto himself or a sexuality unto himself. Instead, he stands under the law of spirituality and of sexuality. I think the word law here is really interesting. And I think as well of the dichotomy of Eros and Logos, this idea that Eros can move into kind of an overwhelming chaos that's violent and destructive. If it does not have something to contain it, if it does not have some kind of structure, some kind of language, some kind of inquiry and understanding of the rhythms of all involved. Eros needs Logos to exist, to be. Therefore, no one escapes these daimons. You shall look upon them as daimons and as a common task and danger, a common burden that life has laid upon you. Thus, life too is for you a common task and danger, as are the gods, and first and foremost, terrible Abraxas. I find that line really compelling. Life too is for you a common task and danger. And now he's going to talk about the balance between community and the individual, singleness. But thinking about sex not just as pleasure, and spirituality not just as an escape, but as forces that we are stewards and guardians of, that we have to keep in balance. And in order to have this dance be generative and healthy, that we need to keep in mind both. And I think that when there's an imbalance, or a misalignment, we want to see it as a problem, which makes us look for a solution. But to really find the rhythm, what is needed is more clarity and more understanding and listening and attention. And that might mean that the doing is really not an action to take, but a stepping back to be curious and observe. Man is weak, and community is therefore indispensable. If your community is not under the sign of the mother, it is under the sign of the phallus. That's really interesting, because what would it mean? What is a community under the sign of the mother? What would the community be like as a result of being under the sign of the mother versus the father? Absence of community is suffering and sickness. Community in everything is dismemberment and dissolution. Differentiation leads to singleness. Singleness is opposed to the community. But because of man's weakness with regard to the gods and daimons and their invincible law, community is necessary. Not for man's sake, but because of the gods. The gods drive you to community. Insofar as the gods impose community upon you, it is necessary. More is bad. In the community, every man shall submit to others, so that the community be maintained, for you need it. In singleness, every man shall place himself above the other, so that every man may come to himself and avoid slavery. It's interesting, this idea of just enough community, that community is necessary, not for us, but because of the gods. What could that mean? And that too much community can enslave. And I think we see that in our hesitations when we read Plato's Republic. Abstention shall hold good in community, extravagance in singleness. Community is depth, singleness is height. I think that's really interesting. Community is depth, singleness is height. We can, in our solitude, in our monastic kind of quarters where we're reading and thinking and reflecting, it does bring us to a kind of ascension in thought, in the abstract kind of sense. But what we lose is groundedness, because other people can tend to ground us. And that might, again, in the extreme, feel as if someone's, I had a dream of being in bed with someone and he had my heel in his hand. And someone bringing us down and maybe possessing us. It can feel caged and it can feel anxiety producing because we want our freedom. But Jung is talking about a balance here. And survival, like a tree rooted into the ground, requires depth. Right measure in community purifies and preserves. Right measure in singleness purifies and increases. When I think about the phrase right measure, I think of Aristotle and the virtues of temperance, moderation, balance, and harmony. And when I read the word purifies, I think of Plotinus and the idea that certain spiritual exercises are purification rituals. Community gives us warmth and singleness gives us light. I think that's so interesting because light and warmth go together. But maybe they don't always ensure or promise each other. You can think of a cold light or a dark warmth. When Philemon had finished, the dead remained silent and did not move, but looked at Philemon with expectation. And then he goes into the 6th sermon.